So as I mentioned before in the previous video, I'm looking for a private business to acquire. And I'll explain how I'm looking for a deal and what are my criteria for searching today. So I'm sharing this so that others can see how I'm doing it, and it might help someone else join me one day in this business or share ideas on how to do things better. I started by looking at the easiest place, and that was business brokers' websites. So there are about 10, maybe 15 or so websites that list businesses for sale in Perth. Well, it's probably about 20 websites in Australia as a whole. About 10 or 15 of those cover Perth. If you want to know why Perth, I explained that in the previous episode. So the first week or so of searching, I went through every page on every broker's site. I kept it open to all of Australia. I was hoping to be finding things in Perth. Anyway, some of these websites had thousands of listings, but I went through page by page because I really had no idea what was possibly out there. I browsed through everything without any filters. Essentially, the breakdown was something like this. There were 90% of all the businesses that I looked at on all the brokers' websites were cafes or restaurants. About 5% of them were fitness studios and gyms. And then there was about 5% of everything else. So I have immediately ruled out cafes and gyms as I think the barrier to entry is just too low and the competition too high in those spaces. I have no experience in cafes and restaurants. I have no experience running gyms and fitness studios. That's not me. I don't have much experience in lots of things, but I'm going to rule those out just because I don't need to fight the insane competition in those spaces. And barriers to entry are low. So also, business to consumer is not really what I want. The reason is because I find business to consumer businesses kind of fickle. See, consumers are hard to please. Trends change, tastes change. It's hard to be the cool cafe for decades. It's hard to be the best gym for decades. These things are also hard to run. There's lots of employees, there's lots of logistics, especially a cafe, like finding waiters and chefs and cleaners and good food. And you have to think about absolutely everything, and everything has to be perfect. One bad experience and the customer, they're gone forever. Like each day, you have no idea if anyone is going to come inside. Like you might have no clients for the day, or you could be run off your feet and you don't have enough staff to service everybody and people get frustrated. It seems to be a guessing game to me. Hats off for those who can run a successful cafe, but that's the furthest thing that I want to be part of. Plus margins are tight at best. Unless you are Jiro's $300 sushi from Tokyo. Awesome movie, by the way. Jiro Dreams of Sushi. That's definitely worth watching. But normally margins are pretty weak in cafes and restaurants. There are obviously exceptions to this rule. There are some specific cafes and specific restaurants that just got excellent operation people in place. They've been doing it forever. They've got amazing loyal customers that come back time and time again. It can work. I'm just saying it's really hard and not something I really feel like doing. I think I want something a little easier. So 5% of what was left. That was also easy to filter down because I ruled out all the trades. So plumbing, construction businesses, electricians. I cut out anything that was obvious there was no real competitive advantage or no real niche. So there's lots of fit out companies and kitchen installers and, trades and things like that, but they don't really have any, they're just taking whatever work they can get. It seems to be a bit of a dogfight. So I want it to be in some specific niche. I don't have any skills either. I'm not a tradesman of any kind. So I rule those out, I think, pretty quickly. Another thing I cut out was e-commerce and importing businesses, like business to consumer businesses. Again, I don't want to be involved in business to consumer as I think it is unreliable. Plus generally quite competitive. If you can import it, then so can someone else. And if you think it's a really interesting idea for the general population, chances are that's going to get competed away. So they're the obvious businesses that people see in their life. They see the homewares store, or they see the online fitness equipment company, or something like that. I used to have an online fitness equipment company, hence why I'm familiar with B2C and e-commerce and why I kind of want to avoid that. The working capital also constraints were frustrating for me in running my e-commerce fitness equipment company. You essentially were outlaying all this money up front to buy the inventory in bulk, getting it all signed, getting it all shipped. These are all costs that you were getting hit with. Then you would have warehousing fees, and then finally you would sell the product and the cash would come back in, and you hope that a lot more cash was going to come back in than the outlay of the money. Yeah, you can work out the financial dynamics of all that, which I did, and my margins were, I don't know, I think at the end of the day, like 20-25% profit margins, but the working capital cycle was quite a hindrance. It was difficult to grow because I had to put more and more reinvested capital back into the business to grow it. It just didn't seem to scale very nicely. So, and then you're always at risk that something would go wrong. So like you'd outlay all of this money and then something would go wrong and there'd be delays in the process. Or at the end of the day, the platforms that you're selling on, whether it's Shopify, Amazon, whatever, you have issues with them. And then finally you get the money at the end of the day. And sometimes you've had to pay for things along the way that you didn't foresee. And anyway, sorry, I'm going into the details there a little bit, but that is my experience. So I was happy to rule out that, even though I know that world. So yeah, essentially what was left after all of this was a bunch of unusual businesses. So here are some examples at what I looked at quite closely. Food packaging distributors, a steel dished ends manufacturer. So that's like the domed end that goes on big gas cylinders. So if you're familiar with TIKR, they have like these bullets on the back of trucks that transport, I don't know, liquefied gas and a range of other chemicals and stuff. The steel cylinders have to have ends on them because that's where all the pressure is going to be at the ends of these cylinders. So that has to be done really well with good steel and all this type of stuff. Anyway, this was a dished end manufacturer of steel for these cylinders. Another business I looked at really closely was a fume cabinet manufacturer and installing business. So fume cabinets for science labs at universities, schools, research centers, things like that, hospitals. Fume cabinets are obviously very important to keep the safety of the experiments away from the human who's running the experiments. They don't breathe it in. Each of these were attractive because of the stock market companies that I had studied. For example, I have studied McFarlane Group PLC in the UK, and they are essentially serial acquirers of packaging distributors. They're rolling up that industry. I've also invested in TIKR, which are involved in gas and liquefied gas containers in Canada. Some of their businesses would need to have these dished ends, so I was familiar with that product at least. And I've invested in Technion in Sweden, which also have a fume cabinet manufacturer as one of their subsidiaries. So because of the research I've done in the stock market and the public companies that I've invested in, allowed me to narrow down my list a little further, which was cool. So these businesses weren't completely foreign to me, which I think was nice. I had already looked at what makes those industries unique and what the interesting parts are about those industries. So while I was also searching through these thousands and thousands of listings, I was starting to put together my criteria of what information I wanted to find out about the business. So it's a bit different to the stock market investment, but I definitely have many similarities between these two lists. So here is what I'm looking for. I'm going through these in detail in another video, like each one of these items. So I was looking for, here's the list on the screen anyway. I'll just leave it here for now. I'll go through this in the next video in detail, why and what's important about each of those items. Some of those items I think will be helpful for you to look for in public markets, private markets, whatever. Maybe that you've got ideas to add to that list or things that you can cross out for whatever reasons. But my goal was then to find out the information about the businesses that I was researching that were for sale and then run them against this criteria. The criteria will always be evolving, by the way. It isn't some magic formula. It's just my guide at the moment. So I was just reaching out to brokers and then I was starting the journey of asking them, trying to ask questions around each one of those criteria topics to see whether it was a positive or negative. So I'll go through what happened on the first call I had with the broker of the food packaging distributor business in the next video. It was kind of shocking. I also did some quite unique research into this one, which I'll share as well. Okay. I hope you're enjoying the building of a serial acquirer journey that I am on. Comments are greatly appreciated. Suggestions, advice, that's all greatly appreciated. Please reach out if you're on a journey like this as well. I use Interactive Brokers for this. By far the safest broker out there. There's a link in the description for that. Okay, see you in the next episode.